Well, Ohio State, along with all the other teams, are wrapping up spring ball by now, and obviously, a lot of you guys that know me knows that I keep a very close eye on Ohio State football, being an Ohio State fan, and I figure the first team to talk about in a string of videos doing a little update on where these programs currently stand. Ohio State would be the first team that I would talk about post-spring, as spring ball just wrapped up, and there isn't as much research as I have to do on Ohio State because I'm able to keep up with it. So we're going to talk about it here. So if you are new around here, check out my TikTok over here, Bash's College Football Show. You could just look up my name too. It should pop up if you just look up Colin Bashnigel. And I'm the host here at Bash's College Football Show. Real quick shout out over to the Oh Hello group. We're going to start up that podcast here soon, and I'm excited to do that as we keep the short form individual videos here in the podcast format where we're going to be having discussions over there. So Ohio State, obviously, every single year, the expectation is national championship. And though they were able to end the 4-year streak that Michigan had put on the Ohio State Buckeyes, the expectation going forward after they got that monkey off the back was, all right, let's go win the Natty. And you saw what you saw against Indiana with the pressure that you just hadn't seen all year on Julian Sayin, and Julian not responding great to it. You kind of thought that they would address it within bowl prep, especially having the extra time off. And frankly, they didn't address it well enough. They did a bunch of different things in the second half of the Miami game that made it a little bit better. But that's the biggest question mark, is you have all these guys returning. And Tyler Bowen decides not to go to the portal, saying that what he has in that room is good enough. We will see if that's good enough, but the development of Julian Sayin's legs is going to be critical, and we have seen that throughout spring ball from Julian Sayin, using his legs more. You saw it in the spring game where the first touchdown was him running it in on the ground. Obviously, full speed ahead, though. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if he's going to tuck it. You don't know if he's going to get stopped short. It looks like he probably would have gotten stopped short. The bottom line is this: we can be encouraged about Julian wanting to use his legs within spring ball. He's had the athleticism to do it. I've never questioned that. It's really, will he choose to do it? And look, I don't have as much of a problem with Julian Sayin as I had with times when CJ Stroud was here, as far as taking off and running, and certainly Kyle McCord. It's not that dramatic to me. But with that being said, that added element is going to help Julian Sayin progress, and it's very clear that that is being put inside his head a lot. But how is he going to be able to do it? How is he going to be able to handle it when the bullets are actually flying and he doesn't have that black jersey on to protect him? So that's the big development mentally and as a leader as well, that Julian Sayin kind of has to get over that hurdle instead of throwing the ball away or taking maybe more of a risky shot than you need to. Let's go ahead and tuck the ball down and pick up a few yards here and there. We'd rather take a profit than just go broke, right? Now, when you're talking about the offensive line that I hinted at, it was big for the offensive line's younger core, specifically at tackle, to get some reps with the ones in spring ball, with Siereveld and Philip Daniels missing a lot of time in spring ball. You had Ian Moore and Carter Lowe play a good bit. Now, Ian Moore ended up playing at the end of the year. He played against Miami. He didn't look great against Miami. And at times leading up to that game, it looked like Ian Moore was ready to progress forward. You know, you can't tell too much from the spring game. I wasn't overly impressed, but we'll talk about that D-line here in a little bit. I will say, getting Carter Lowe those reps as a young player, I don't think he should or will start, but it really helps you when you have somebody to point to. It's going to help for the progression of Philip Daniels at that right tackle spot. And as far as the left tackle spot goes, I think that it is critical when you kind of have a question on who the starting three guards, not even who the starting three guards are going to be, but if they're going to be quality enough, you know Luke Montgomery and Carson Hinsman should be good enough. Can we get the tackles to a comfortable position where Austin Siereveld, who's clearly the best offensive lineman on this team, can kick to his more natural position, and that is at guard. Whether it be left guard or right guard, I don't think they're going to want to flip his stance, but You never know. That's always an option. I just think having a guy like Austin Saravel being able to kick inside because of what Ian Moore can bring at left tackle, I think that could be critical for Ohio State in this offensive line. If Ian Moore can really develop into a high round draft pick and end up being a solid tackle on that left side, you have more flexibility with your best offensive lineman. And let's face it, with Austin Saravel, he might be the best offensive lineman on this team, on last year's team. He is not what we had with Donovan Jackson a couple of years ago, where he has the athleticism and the raw ability to kick out to left tackle and be successful on a national championship run. That's not what Austin Saravel is going to be. He might be serviceable enough. You might be able to disguise it, but ultimately he is not going to be a dominant force at that position. He would be a dominant force maybe inside more so. So the offensive line, that was one of the big questions that I have, and coming out of spring ball, it was one of the biggest questions I had going into spring ball. But one of the other questions I had was, what's going to happen with this secondary? How it's going to gel? I had no idea until we've gotten a little bit more clarity on who was going to play nickel, who was going to take that starting safety spot between these transfers. Well, it's definitely cleared up. Now, I thought Earl Little Jr. was the better player between him and Terry Moore. It is very clear that Earl Little Jr. is not only better than Terry Moore, he might be one of the best players on this defense. He had an amazing spring from all accounts that I've heard of, and I think Earl Little Jr. is set to break out for Ohio State, to where if there are less people familiar with him because he kind of went away from watching Florida State football last year after they lost to Virginia and it kind of spiraled out of control following that, Earl Little Jr. is a really good football player at a marquee program. I could see this turning into a big breakout season for him, opposite of Jalen McLean. And there's also a lot of confidence in Leroy Roker. I think Leroy Roker can play a serviceable role on this defense. He's versatile. He could slide down to the nickel. Maybe you could see Earl Little Jr. be in a box in a more run situation. But the nickel corner spot in a specific passing situation has kind of cleared up. I think Jermaine Matthews is going to be that guy. Now, they're cross-training him right now. He could be a better corner than Dominic Kelly. But from the sounds of all of it, Devin Sanchez is cornerback one, and it's not even close. That's what everything is telling me. He's on a trajectory that by the time the season starts, and certainly when the season ends, he is going to separate himself from the pack, from all those corners that are in Tim Walton's room. So you got Devin Sanchez up here. Dominic Kelly is a guy who is going to be good enough to play on the outside if they need Jermaine Matthews to go inside. He's going to be very serviceable at that spot. The question I'm going to have is, when you're in more matching personnel against heavier set offenses, which you are kind of coming back and you're going to get in the Big Ten, who is that outside corner? I still think it's going to be by default Jermaine Matthews. And then I also think that if you try to mix the two and you don't end up going three linebacker, you just bring a third safety on the field and have one in the box to help in the run game. Jermaine Matthews, I think, will be the outside guy. That's what it's sounding like now, but Dominic Kelly is going to play a significant role on this defense, specifically on third down in passing situations here. Let's move up on that defense, though, for Matt Patricia and what he has to work with this D-line. And the first thing I got to say is you're starting to see a lot of progress and development out of Will Smith Jr., and the two transfers that have stood out, one more than the other. John Walker has looked really good in spring ball, and he started to come on late in spring ball. And look, this is a guy who was a very highly touted recruit, the highest ranked recruit in UCF football history as far as the recruiting services go, and he comes over to Ohio State. He's expected to make an impact. I thought he looked good in the spring game. I thought that the stuff that I was hearing was very positive towards John Walker. I think Tim Smith and Edric Houston are kind of penciled in as the starters there. And the big thing about Edric Houston is I really don't think he was ever 100% healthy last year. And when you talk about Edric Houston at that defensive tackle spot, you got to remember how good he was as a true freshman when him and Caden McDonald came in together when they were behind Tyleik and Ty Hamilton back in 2024. Edric Houston had a disappointing year. It's safe to say. But I still think that there is a high ceiling with Edric Houston, and I think that he could tap into it if he stays fully healthy this year. I'm excited about the interior of this D-line. I think there's good depth that they have. I think there's a lot more confidence in Will Smith Jr. than you would have had a year ago with him. Now, on the edge, we know Kenyatta Jackson is going to be the staple on one side, but who's that other guy? A lot of rave reviews about Quay Rusal, specifically as a pass rusher coming in from Alabama as that partnership with Tim Smith. But there's also been talk about Christian Alliegro playing a little bit of edge as a linebacker, playing an Arvell Reese type of role, whatever that means, because Arvell Reese, as we know, didn't play enough edge last year. That might be perfect, though, for Christian Alliegro. Only in certain situations he plays edge, because I'm not sure if he's going to be that dynamic edge rusher. You obviously have Bo Atkinson back from last year. Atkinson was very disappointing last year, and he did not play a lot down the stretch after it kind of got figured out that he just was not going to be all that great on this defense. And you can also look at a younger player, and one that flashes for me who I think physically really stacks up well and complements Kenyatta Jackson well, it's Zion Grady. I think in third down situations when you're trying to pin your ears back, having athletes like Grady, Kenyatta Jackson, and Quay Rusal is going to be big time for Ohio State. That's something that they've kind of, even as good as the D-line's been, that athleticism, that quick twitch is something Ohio State didn't have when Arvell Reese wasn't in those pass rush situations the last 2 years. So that's going to be at least exciting. Somebody who looks a little bit more athletic than your Caden Currys, Jack Sawyers, JT Tuimoloau. Somebody who's going to get off the ball fast and be more of a speed rusher and be somebody that can give a lot of fits to some of the best left tackles that are bigger. They're built. And I think that the progression that you've seen from this defensive line has been really, really good and really promising, and you can be optimistic as a Buckeye fan. Now, you got to talk about the biggest question on the defense coming out of spring ball. We have two outstanding linebackers that Ohio State has to replace in Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese. We obviously know Peyton Pierce is going to step into that role. This is a guy who has been in the program now a couple of years. He's going to be very cerebral when it comes to being on the field and making decisions and being that kind of quarterback of the defense, specifically in the front seven. So I have faith that Peyton Pierce is going to be a really good player for Ohio State at the linebacker spot. But that other linebacker is very interesting because, like I had already hinted at with the edge rusher situation, you don't know what Christian Alliegro's role is really going to be, and also how versatile he can really be. That's going to be a big question mark for him specifically. I'm very encouraged by the promise that Sincere Johnson has shown, but will he be ready to be a guy that plays a role on this defense in James Laurinaitis' room? But the big thing is we did not see Riley Pettijohn this spring, and you heard James Laurinaitis talk about this with Riley Pettijohn, that the mental stuff during the spring is going to be really important for Riley Pettijohn. The physical tools are there. I got no doubt about that. But yeah, if you are going to be out of your gap in the run game, if you're not going to be able to be disciplined with your eyes and coverage, how are you going to be able to play no matter how physically gifted you are at that linebacker position? There was a high bar that was set with the level of play you got from Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese last year. I think that that's going to be a big burden for a player like Riley Pettijohn, and he's really got to take this stuff seriously while he's working through some of the mental stuff. Let's flip back to the offense, though, because this is a fun question that's not necessarily a big question mark, because the wide receiver position is not a huge question mark. You have Brandon Inniss, who you expect to continue to get better. I thought got better throughout the course of the season last year. And even though he was a little disappointing to some of us, expected to be more of a go-to for a young quarterback like Julian Sain was last year, now he's got a chance to really expand upon his game a little bit. So I have confidence that Brandon Inniss and the talent that he has, he's going to be really good and complementary to Jeremiah Smith, who is the best receiver in America and has been for the last couple of years. Wide receiver 3 is very interesting. I'm actually starting to come around on the idea that Devin McEwen is that guy, the transfer from UTSA, a very quick, twitchy slot guy. He doesn't do a lot after the catch, but I think that when you're talking about Cortez Hankton wanting to have that be a big part of his room, Devin McEwen has a skill set to do it. He just doesn't have the film showing that he's done it a lot. So if McEwen can develop that skill set to be a great after the catch receiver, he's got a leg up on a lot of these guys. And obviously Kyle Parker already being familiar with Cortez Hankton gives him a little bit of a leg up, already being in his room last year. I just don't know if Kyle Parker is going to be good enough. I think he's got to show a lot more effort, a lot more grit than he did at LSU. And honestly, the competition within that room is going to drive it out of him, and you're going to either sink or swim if you're Kyle Parker. But the two young players that we got to talk about Brock Boyd, because even though he's not going to take any headlines from the spring game, you are going to hear about Brock Boyd the next 3 to 4 months when talking about this Ohio State team potentially playing a role on this team. Cortez Hankton does like to rotate his receivers a ton more than Brian Hartline ever did. And then the other part about Brock Boyd is he had a great spring where he was just talked about so highly, even though the spring game didn't necessarily show it. And this is why you kind of have to take the spring game with a grain of salt and listen to the noise and the word around the Woody that you hear. And Brock Boyd, tremendous throughout this offseason and throughout this spring. Now, Chris Henry Jr., we got to talk about this because he kind of went a little bit under the radar when the Brock Boyd noise got a little bit louder. He lost his black stripe, truly the last practice that he could lose his black stripe, because it was a practice before the when the high school coaches come in and they do the drills for the high school coaches. Nobody's losing their black stripe during that. Nobody's losing their black stripe during the spring game. Chris Henry Jr., when you see him physically, there's not really anybody that looks like him. He's longer than Jeremiah Smith. He's got ball skills like Marv had, at least from a potential standpoint. And let's say Chris Henry Jr. does not make an immediate impact this year, which with the rotation mindset and philosophy that Cortez Hankton has, I don't even think that that's going to be the case. I think he's going to serve a role. But with that being said, when you see a guy like Chris Henry Jr., as physically gifted as he is, 1 year of development, you can look forward to 2027 and say that's going to be a big year for Chris Henry Jr. And you saw a look into the future. Tavian St. Clair looked sharp in the spring game, and he has looked sharp all of spring. It's at a point now where you're talking about, shoot, I'm excited for Tavian's opportunity, but I'm also not worried if Tavian has to come into the game. God willing, nothing happens to Julian, but if something were to happen, it is football. You are confident in your backup option in Tavian St. Clair. And that future looks really bright between Tavian St. Clair, Brock Boyd, and Chris Henry Jr., and Gifford, and all of these guys, these young receivers paired up with Tavian St. Clair. I am excited to see that in the future. And even though I'm excited for 2026 for Ohio State, 2027 is also looking great when you're also mixing in the young promise with these DBs as well. If the truth is Devin Sanchez is the best corner, he's only a sophomore. He's going to be back for 27 as well. And you get a second-year player out of Dominic Kelly, who is making strides and real pushes for playing time. And Jay Timmons sounds like a guy who's going to play somewhat of a role this year, but even if he doesn't, he's going to be able to step into a role in 27 too. So all in all, when you're looking at spring ball for Ohio State, a lot to look at going up for this year, but a lot of promise in the younger players, and you never also know what the transfer portal can do, but it gives a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, so that way these guys don't transfer like Bryce West, Aaron Scott did in the secondary, like Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter did on offense. There is a light at the end of the tunnel for these younger players, and I think that they're going to be able to see it and capitalize on that. So there's your general Ohio State spring wrap up. There's not really a statement on how good or bad I feel about this team, other than I just feel really good, and what you want to hear from progress and what this roster is going to look like. It's kind of becoming a little bit more clear, and we still have fall camp to go through. We still have summer workouts to go through, but all in all, when you're an Ohio State fan, you can look at spring ball as a tremendous success and a great job of development based on everything that you hear. But for now, thank you guys for tuning in. Like the video if you made it this far, and subscribe for more content like this. I'll see you guys in the next video.